"It'll kill you in a week," echoed the advertisements for shots. Believe me, that wasn't hyperbole. People were disappearing left and right, and all there was left to do for their friends and family was to check and see if they'd been quarantining themselves out of health or out of sickness. I even had to miss bachelor's night because the host was no longer letting people into her house. The virus was claiming folks faster than they could post a will on Facebook. And those of us left weren't about to do wellness checks. I had to check on Sharon, though. She was my baby sister after all. She'd gone off the radar 3 days earlier, and the rest of us were worried sick. Her girlfriend wasn't exactly the kind to let a silly plague keep her inside, and my sister wasn't the kind to refuse a kiss from Rio. Turns out, they were fine. Out in the suburbs, the flu was nothing more than a boogeyman. They even offered me their pull-out bed, but I could wait it out. When you have a limited time left, you have to learn to enjoy the little things. So yeah, I caught the bug. Right outside my condo, actually. It's a bit of a wild story. Some jerk was in far too much of a rush to escape to bother to check his rearview mirror. He clocked me nice and well. I don't know whether to thank or curse the guy who took me back to my apartment after the collision. Sure, he stopped me from bleeding out on the sidewalk, but he also signed my death warrant. He even seemed to take joy in the fact, "It'll kill you in a week," he wrote on a notepad next to my bed. At the very least, I didn't make anyone worry. I posted, called, and emailed long into that dark night. Everyone would know that I was dead. And hopefully my friends would take my ideas for my funeral to heart. I wasn't quite sure whether my body would still be infectious, so I asked for a Viking funeral. A Viking funeral with karaoke. I wanted to be sung into the next life with the tones of Toto's Africa. Preferably a poor rendition of it. Having numbered days was actually pretty fun. I went out every day. I could explore this city at my leisure. Hell, most of the tourist traps were not only empty, but left unlocked. I got to take the best panorama anyone's ever taken in the city, sleep in the mayor's bed, and scribble all over just about anything I wanted to. In the long run, that only burned about 5 days. I wasn't consciously expecting to go sans depression, but, well, I kind of was. After all, I'd been fine for days. In fact, I'd felt fantastic, far from the ache of past flus. My muscles breathed strength. I'd been walking 10 plus miles a day and never tired once. The body could only feel so good, though. I was gonna die in a few days, and that much was final. I suppose this was probably my mortality talking, but I suddenly wanted to make a difference. Suddenly, every missed opportunity to walk the elderly across the street, and every time I cut someone off, rang loudly in my head. If I was about to die, I might as well stack my deck a bit. I didn't necessarily believe in hell, But at this point, of course I believed in hell. The leftover chaos gave me ample opportunities for helping. Donning a heroic surgical mask and sterile gloves. Had more time, probably would have made a cape too. I pulled people out of burning cars, stopped looters, and saved at least one cat from a grim predicament. But it was my second to last good deed that changed things. Somebody's wires were old, and the entire apartment complex lit up like a wick. I thought I'd heard crying. All I really heard was a tickle me Elmo. Furry little prick. My last sight before the roof collapsed. The next morning, I pushed the timbers off myself and walked away. I didn't understand it, and I was starting to feel the flu in earnest, so I didn't care to understand. My head was operating at 15%, as were my limbs. I didn't have long to live. I staggered home as the feeling started to get pretty bad. Thank God I'd handled everything beforehand. A week's notice wasn't ideal, but it was adequate enough. I never expected the helicopter to come hurtling down. Had I not been chilled half mad, I'd have probably run away from the mere blaze. But I could see someone in the wreckage. If I was dying tonight, I may as well try to save one more person. I dragged her body out of the chopper. My gloves and mask burnt beyond function. And she didn't look too good either. I think she caught it with my sneeze. In a sudden, allergic moment, I sneezed onto her burning, lifeless body. And before I knew it, she sneezed back. Suddenly, all I could think about was this dreaded flu and how quickly it had spread. I sneezed, and then she sneezed back, and I watched the hole in her torso mend itself together. And then I could feel my organs shut down, while hers began whirring back into action. And I had just enough strength left to pull her into my apartment and jot down the best explanation I could muster, just to remind her, it'll kill you in a week, but not a moment sooner.